Beautifully Unhinged, Episode 1, The First Time I Was Left Behind. Hello, friends. Before we get started, let's just acknowledge what's happening here. My hair isn't done. I'm not wearing makeup. I'm not polished. I'm sitting here in a t-shirt that literally says, I love talking to myself. She gets me. Which honestly feels like the most appropriate shirt I could have picked for recording a podcast. Because for most of my life, I've spent a lot of time talking to myself. And right now you're going to hear the landscapers outside. Oops. Trying to understand myself, trying to heal myself, trying to figure out why certain things hurt the way they do. And if you've ever survived abandonment, chances are you've had a few of those conversations with yourself too. The truth is, I could have waited until my hair was perfect. I could have put on makeup. I could have tried to look polished and put together. I could have. But that's not what Beautifully Unhinged is about. This podcast is about showing up exactly as I am, where I am. Some days that's strong. Some days that's messy. Some days it's wisdom, and most days it's sarcasm and caffeine. Today, it's a woman in a t-shirt talking about her first heartbreak that she ever experienced. And spoiler alert, that heartbreak started before I was old enough to even remember it. So, welcome to Beautifully Unhinged. If you're here, chances are you've carried some things too. Maybe you've been hurt. Maybe you've been overlooked. Maybe you've spent years trying to understand why certain wounds just never seem to heal. Well, this podcast is my story. Not because my story is more important than anyone else's, but because I've learned some things along the way. The things we survive often become the things that connect us. So today, I want to start at the beginning. Not the beginning of my marriage, not the beginning of motherhood, not the beginning of cancer and brain surgery and all the things that life would eventually throw at me. I want to start with the first wound that I ever carried. Abandonment. I was born in South Florida in June of 1979 to a very young mom. When I was still a baby, my mother left me with an acquaintance and their family, and she just disappeared. Now you're hearing my dog in the background. So imagine that. Before I was old enough to understand words, I learned what it felt like to be left behind. Of course, babies don't remember events the way adults do, but our hearts remember and our nervous systems remember. Somewhere deep inside me, a message was written before I ever even had a voice. People leave. For years, I didn't realize how much that message shaped my life. The family who took me in became the closest thing that I ever had to a real family, and I'll use that term very loosely. For a time, I felt loved, and for a time, I felt safe. Those moments mattered more than they probably ever really knew. But life certainly wasn't easy. It wasn't simple. We moved between Florida and Mississippi and Alabama. We struggled financially, and food stamps were normal. Hand-me-downs, no matter too big or too small, those were normal too. Growing, raising food and animals were mostly what our dinners consisted of. And don't get me wrong, there is nothing wrong living with farm life from farm to table. That's awesome. There's a lot to be carried over into my life today from that. But that's not about this discussion. From outside, some people might call living farm life like that very hard, and it was. But poverty was much harder. Yet it wasn't the thing that hurt me most. Abandonment was. Because when a child believes that they are unwanted, they spend the rest of their life trying to answer one question that they should have never had to ask to begin with. Why wasn't I enough? As I got older, life became more complicated. School was certainly no refuge for me. I was bullied very badly. At home, things were difficult. I learned to become tough, though. I became a tomboy. And I learned that if the world was going to hit me, I'd better learn how to hit it back. Not physically, emotionally. so I built an armor. The problem with armor is that it protects you from pain, but it also keeps people from seeing the real you. There were moments when things became so overwhelming that I literally ran away. I was 10 years old the first time. One day I ran barefoot across our grass, down the hill, across the street to the pastor's house, because I no longer felt safe. I remember wanting so badly for someone to see me, really see me. I remember hoping someone would finally hear what I couldn't find the words to say. A social worker did come out, and questions were asked. Nothing happened. Life continued. Abuse and abandonment continued as well. Sometimes you can scream without making a sound. And for years, I carried all of that. The abandonment, the confusion, the anger, the fear. And here's the thing nobody tells you. When abandonment happens in childhood, you don't just heal because you magically become an adult. You carry it into your friendships. You carry it into your relationships. You carry it into your marriage. And you carry that into your motherhood of your own children. You carry it into every room you ever walk into. For a long time, I thought my story was about being abandoned. Now, I think my story is actually about surviving abandonment. Because despite everything, I kept going. I got married. I built a life. I survived a divorce. I remarried. I raised children, built a career, fought cancer, survived brain surgery, and somehow, despite every reason to become bitter, I kept finding a reason to hope. That doesn't mean that the wound disappeared. It means the wound stopped being the author of my story. Today, when I think about abandonment, I don't think about what was taken from me. I think about what was built inside of me. Resilience, compassion, empathy, the ability to recognize pain in another person because I've walked through my own. If you're listening today and you've ever felt abandonment by a parent, by a spouse, a friend, by life itself, I want you to hear me. Your story didn't end when someone walked away. Your worth was never determined by who stayed or who left. And the fact that you're still here means your story is still being written. So this podcast is called Beautifully Unhinged because life isn't neat, healing isn't neat, growing isn't neat. Sometimes we break and sometimes we even fall apart. Sometimes we're held together by little more than faith and pure stubbornness. But somehow we keep going. And that's beautiful. Thank you for joining me for episode 1. Next time we'll continue the story, not the polished version, of course, the real one. The one that made me who I am. Until next time, remember, the people who abandoned you may have shaped your story, but they do not get to write your ending. Take care.